85% of Americans drink caffeine every single day. They import it from Colombia, from Vietnam, from Ethiopia. They pay premium prices for beans shipped across oceans in massive container ships. Meanwhile, a plant containing more caffeine than green tea grows wild across 15 states. You have probably driven past it this morning. And for 200 years, someone has been working very hard to make sure you never learn its name, but by the end of this video, you will know what this plant is and how to grow unlimited caffeine in your yard. Walk into any grocery store in America. You will find an entire aisle dedicated to caffeine. Coffee from Brazil, tea from China, energy drinks manufactured in factories, supplements extracted in laboratories. Americans spend more than $80 billion on coffee alone every single year. That money flows out of the country. It crosses borders. It funds plantations on the other side of the planet. Now here's the question nobody asks. Why does America import all of its caffeine? This is a continent with millions of acres of farmland, with climates ranging from tropical to temperate, and with indigenous plant knowledge stretching back thousands of years. Why does not a single caffeine crop grow commercially on American soil? The answer they will give you is simple. No caffeinated plants are native to North America. Coffee comes from Africa. Tea comes from Asia. Cacao comes from Central America. The United States just got unlucky in the botanical lottery. That is the official story. The official story is a lie. There is one caffeinated plant native to North America, just one. It grows from the coastal plains of Virginia down through the Carolinas, across Georgia and Florida, along the Gulf Coast through Alabama and Mississippi, and deep into Louisiana and Texas. 15 states, millions of acres. A plant so common that landscapers install it in suburban yards as decoration without knowing what it actually is. This plant contains real caffeine, the same molecule that powers your morning coffee. It also contains theobromine, the compound that makes chocolate feel good, and theophylline, a molecule so medically valuable that pharmaceutical companies synthesize it for asthma medications. 3 psychoactive compounds in one leaf. Indigenous peoples across the American Southeast knew this plant intimately. The Cherokee drank it, the Creek drank it, the Seminole, the Timucua, and the Chickasaw. Archaeological evidence from shell middens and ceramic residue analysis proves continuous use stretching back at least 8,000 years. That is 3,000 years before anyone in China started drinking tea. When Spanish conquistadors arrived in Florida in the 1500s, they found every tribe they encountered drinking a dark, caffeinated beverage. Spanish priests in St. Augustine wrote detailed accounts. By 1615, a priest recorded that there is no Spaniard or Indian who does not drink it every day in the morning or evening. The colonizers adopted the native drink within a generation. Ships carried dried leaves back to Europe. For a brief moment, this American caffeine source threatened to enter the global market. Then something happened, something deliberate, something that erased this plant from Western consciousness for 200 years. The plant is called Yaupon holly. Its scientific name is Ilex vomitoria. Say that Latin name again, Ilex vomitoria. The literal sense many people hear is vomit holly. That name was assigned in 1789 by William Ayton. He was the royal gardener to King George III at the Royal Botanic Gardens at Kew in London. He gave this plant a name that would destroy its commercial potential forever. Modern science confirms that Yaupon does not make you vomit. Researchers have tested the leaves extensively, and they found no emetic compound. The caffeine content is comparable to green tea. Theobromine and theophylline produce a smooth, sustained energy without jitters or crashes. People drink Yaupon tea today with zero nausea, so why the name? William Ayton based his classification on European accounts of Native American ceremonies. Several southeastern tribes used Yaupon in purification rituals. They would drink very large quantities of the tea and then induce vomiting as a spiritual cleansing practice. The vomiting was ritual and intentional. It was produced by drinking massive volumes of liquid and sometimes by adding other plants to the mixture. The Yaupon itself did not cause the vomiting. Ayton either misunderstood that distinction or deliberately ignored it. The result was the same. He attached a name to this plant that made it commercially untouchable. Who would buy a tea called Vomit Holly? Now ask yourself, who benefited from destroying an American caffeine competitor in 1789? The British East India Company controlled the global tea trade. It held a monopoly on tea imports to Britain and its colonies. This monopoly generated enormous wealth, and it funded the expansion of the British Empire. The company was so powerful that it effectively controlled the government's trade policy. When American colonists dumped tea into Boston Harbor in 1773, they were protesting the East India Company's stranglehold on the market. Yaupon represented an existential threat to that monopoly. Here was a caffeinated plant that grew wild in the American colonies, and it required no cultivation, no importation, no taxation, no company to process and distribute it. Any colonist with access to the coastal plains could harvest free caffeine forever. Some historians, including Dr. Jack Putz at the University of Florida, have suggested that William Ayton was connected to East India Company interests. The circumstantial evidence is compelling. Ayton worked for the king, and the king's government depended on East India Company revenues. The company needed American colonists buying British tea, not harvesting their own. And Ayton gave Yaupon a name that guaranteed no European would ever drink it willingly. Coincidence is possible. Conspiracy is also possible. What is certain is the outcome. The name stuck. Yaupon vanished from European awareness. By 1800, almost no one outside the American South had heard of it. But the suppression went deeper than a Latin name. In the 1830s, the United States government forcibly relocated the Cherokee, Creek, Chickasaw, Choctaw, and Seminole nations from their ancestral lands. The trail moved these tribes from the southeastern states where Yaupon grows naturally to Oklahoma, where it does not. The people who knew this plant best, who had cultivated relationships with it for 8,000 years, were physically removed from its habitat. The knowledge did not transfer completely. Oral traditions were disrupted. Ceremonial practices were suppressed by missionaries and government agents. Within 2 generations, the deep botanical knowledge of southeastern tribes had been fragmented and diminished. White Southerners continued drinking Yaupon through the 1800s, but it carried a stigma. It was the drink of poor people who could not afford imported tea. During the Civil War, Confederate soldiers drank Yaupon when supply lines collapsed. This cemented its reputation as a desperation beverage, something you drank when you had no other choice. By 1900, Yaupon had been completely erased from American consciousness as a beverage. The plant remained common. Landscapers discovered it made excellent hedges. It was evergreen, drought-tolerant, and required almost no maintenance. Garden centers across the South sold millions of Yaupon shrubs for decorative purposes. Caffeine was still there, in every leaf, in every yard, hiding in plain sight. Now let us talk about what is actually in this plant. Researchers at Texas A&M University conducted a comprehensive analysis of Yaupon leaf chemistry. They found caffeine concentrations between 0.65% and 0.85% by dry weight. This is comparable to green tea and higher than many commercial tea varieties. A standard cup of Yaupon tea contains roughly the same caffeine as a cup of green tea. But the caffeine is only part of the story. Yaupon also contains theobromine at a ratio of approximately 5:1 caffeine to theobromine. Theobromine is the compound responsible for the pleasant feelings associated with chocolate consumption. It is a mild stimulant that promotes relaxation and mood elevation. The combination of caffeine and theobromine creates what many users describe as focused energy without anxiety. The third compound is theophylline. This molecule relaxes smooth muscle tissue and opens airways. Pharmaceutical companies manufacture synthetic theophylline for asthma and respiratory conditions. In Yaupon, it occurs naturally alongside the other stimulants. The Texas A&M study found that Yaupon leaves provide 50 to 100% of the antioxidant activity of green tea. The leaves are rich in chlorogenic acid, rutin, and other polyphenols associated with reduced inflammation and cellular protection. Researchers at another institution studied Yaupon's effects on human colon cells. They identified flavonol compounds that showed preferential inhibition of cancer cells compared to healthy cells. The mechanism involved upregulation of a specific microRNA associated with inflammatory response. This is preliminary research, not medical advice, but it suggests Yaupon contains bioactive compounds worthy of serious scientific attention. One additional advantage: Yaupon contains almost no tannins. Tannins are the compounds that make tea bitter when oversteeped. You cannot oversteep Yaupon. Leave the leaves in boiling water for an hour. The tea will not turn bitter. This makes preparation nearly foolproof. So we have a plant with documented caffeine content, beneficial secondary compounds, and centuries of safe human consumption. A plant that is native to America and grows wild across 15 states. A plant that was deliberately misnamed and systematically forgotten. What would it take to grow this yourself? Yaupon holly is one of the most resilient plants in North American horticulture. It tolerates full sun and it tolerates deep shade. It grows in sand and it grows in clay. It survives drought conditions that would kill most ornamentals. It tolerates salt spray, making it common in coastal landscapes. It handles flooding, and it handles freezing temperatures down to USDA Zone 7, with some specimens surviving in Zone 6. The plant has no serious pest or disease problems. Deer generally avoided. It requires no fertilizer once established. No irrigation after the first year, no pesticides, no herbicides, no inputs whatsoever. You may already own one. Yaupon is sold at garden centers across the South under variety names like Nana, Schillings, and Pride of Houston. Landscapers install it as foundation plantings, hedges, and specimen trees. Millions of American homeowners have caffeine growing in their yards and do not know it. If you want to start from scratch, nurseries sell Yaupon in sizes ranging from small containers to large specimen plants. It establishes quickly and begins producing harvestable leaves within 2 to 3 years. A mature Yaupon can reach 15 to 25 feet in height if left unpruned, or it can be maintained as a compact shrub indefinitely. Harvesting is simple. Yaupon is evergreen, so leaves are available year-round. Pick young leaves and tender stems. You can use them fresh, dried, or roasted. Fresh leaves produce a lighter, greener flavor similar to green tea. Dried leaves are more convenient for storage. Roasted leaves develop a deeper, smokier character similar to yerba mate. Brewing requires nothing special. Boiling water, then steep 3 to 5 minutes. The leaves can be re-steeped multiple times before losing potency. Some people prefer cold brewing overnight in the refrigerator. One caution: the red berries are mildly toxic to humans. Birds eat them without issue, and that is how the plant spreads naturally. Do not consume the berries yourself. Leaves and stems only. Consider what this plant represents in a larger context. Coffee is one of the top 6 drivers of deforestation worldwide. The global coffee industry cleared over 2.5 million acres of Central American forest to create sun-grown plantations. In 2017 alone, the top 10 coffee-producing countries emitted 21 million tons of carbon dioxide from deforestation linked to coffee production. That is equivalent to 4.5 million cars on the road. Coffee requires massive water inputs. It demands specific climate conditions. It is vulnerable to disease and climate change. The supply chain stretches across oceans, dependent on international shipping and complex logistics. Yaupon requires none of this. It grows where it grows. It needs no irrigation, no deforestation, no international shipping, no carbon-intensive supply chain. One plant in your backyard produces caffeine for decades with 0 ongoing inputs. This is not about rejecting coffee. This is about recognizing that alternatives exist, that they have always existed, that someone worked very hard to make sure you never knew. The British Empire is gone. The East India Company dissolved in 1874. William Ayton has been dead for more than 200 years, but the name he assigned still appears in every botanical database, Ilex vomitoria. The LIE persists in Latin. New companies are emerging to challenge that legacy. Small producers in Texas and Florida and Georgia are harvesting Yaupon and selling it as tea. They are fighting against 2 centuries of manufactured ignorance, against a name designed to disgust, against the simple fact that most Americans have never heard the word Yaupon in their lives. The plant does not care about any of this. It does not care about empires or companies or botanical names. It cares about sunlight, about spreading its seeds through bird droppings across the coastal plains, about producing caffeine in every leaf, every spring, every summer, every fall, every winter. It has been doing this for millions of years. It will continue for millions more. 8,000 years ago, the first humans in North America discovered this plant and recognized its value. They built ceremonies around it. They traded it across vast distances. They passed the knowledge from generation to generation for 300 generations. Then someone decided that knowledge was inconvenient, and they buried it. But buried things can be dug up. Forgotten names can be remembered, and a plant that grows wild across 15 states cannot be erased no matter how hard anyone tries. You know now. You know that free caffeine grows in American soil. You know that your neighbor's hedge might be a coffee substitute. You know that 8,000 years of human use prove safety and efficacy. You know exactly why you were never told. The next time you drive past a landscaped yard in the South, look for the small evergreen shrubs with the dense rounded leaves. Look for the red berries in winter. Look for the plant that an empire tried to destroy with a single Latin word. It is still there. It was always there, and now you see it.